Sim Racing Perspectives podcast for Sunday, the 27th of May 2018. I'm your host, Davy Jones, and I'm here with Mike from Sim Racing 604.
Hey everyone.
And Alex from The Extra Mile.
Hello guys.
And today, thanks to Mike, we have a special guest. We have William Marsh from the Sim Racing Paddock.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're welcome, and thank you for joining, Will. And before we start, for those of us who are gamers and have been gamers for a long time, before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to remember John Peter Bain, Total Biscuit, who influenced many of us who play games, and particularly on PC. And we'd like to send our deepest condolences to his family and friends. Total Biscuit touched the lives of all of us, and we'll miss him, and most of all, we'll remember him. So I just wanted to add that before we start.
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us, Will. It's great to have you here. We've sort of messaged back and forth on a few comment threads and things like that, but it's great to have the opportunity to chat with you, man. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's one thing to really chat over text. It's another to actually hear the voice behind what's going on. And yeah, it's nice to officially meet you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So can you tell us and our listeners a bit about how you got into sim racing? Were you, did you ever do any real racing, or did you just come up through video games, or how'd you sort of get into this?
So the only real track experience I actually have, apart from one autocross and a Jaguar F-Type, was I did the Jim Russell karting school at Cinema Raceway, but that never really was something that I was actually brought up in. My family, we were really into the technology scene early on. My dad was in real estate and things like that, so we always had a couple computers in the house. Usually they were decent spec, and I actually got involved in sim racing from a really early age, where I actually got started on Papyrus's NASCAR Racing 1999 season, except I had no idea what the heck I was doing. I was only 6 years old at the time, and we just had the keyboard. So yeah, I did start off as a keyboard sim racer, and I will await the flame wars in the comments. But I really did get that sense of enjoyment of actually feeling like you were driving something realistic. And in my case, it was more just enjoying hitting the wall and seeing the pit crew tearing off the broken components of the car. But as I was growing up, I still had that passion for the racing games. And I kind of forgot about that sim racing element. But then around 2005, I got my first taste of real serious sim racing again, where I actually started off with Gran Turismo 3 for the PS2, which I ironically won in a Crash Team Racing competition, where it was this old video game store. They were holding this competition using Crash Team Racing, and second place allows you to win any video game they had for sale. And I saw Gran Turismo 3, looked on the back, saw the Nissan GTR race car. I was like, that looks pretty cool. And I decided to take that as my prize, popped it in, and I was like, where's this been my whole life? And jumped in, bought the Mad Catz MC2 steering wheel, which is a piece of crap wheel, but hey, it's at least something. And I just sunk so many hours into it and developed that passion. And then I entered the rabbit hole with PC sim racing. I got into NASCAR sim racing, NASCAR 2003, R Factor, and then eventually iRacing, Assetto Corsa, and just the rest is history.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's amazing the impact that Gran Turismo had on our community. You know, it's one of the most hated on sims far and away. But at the same time, you know, yourself, myself, I know George Ortner, I know Billy Strange, all these guys, we really, really loved Gran Turismo back in the day. And it's just had such an impact on the community as a whole. So nice to hear it getting more love from you as well, Will. So how did you transition or how did you decide to get into having a YouTube channel and starting Sim Racing Paddock?
So it's kind of funny. I had this passion for a long time of like just either starting a blog, YouTube channel, or whatever. And back around 2013, I had a few very small attempts at just doing a for fun blog where I had this one on Blogspot actually, and it was called Checkered Flag Sim Racing. I think you can still find it, and like it's like cfsimracing.blogspot.com or something. I still left it up, but I think almost all of the images are dead on it, which is funny. But I did that, and then after a while, I got basically poached by Inside Sim Racing, where they liked what I had, and then they were hiring for a blogger, so joined in, and I really enjoyed that, and it gave me a taste of what was going on behind the scenes. And then it was something where I felt I was faced with the dilemma whether I would go to Washington and sort of take over that role that was eventually taken by John Sable, or like take in a different direction. And at first I was really eager to do that. I was really eager to basically share my vision to a wide subscriber base. But as I was starting to go forward with that idea, I was noticing that the vision for ISR was not in line with what I was looking for. With Sim Racing Paddock, I was really looking to have a like by the community for the community mentality, and I'm still working on that, but it felt like ISR was heading more towards the marketing. It was heading a lot more towards like just really trying to appease the advertisers, which there is a nice element when it is coming to advertising and marketing, but at the same time, you are really looking to have that element where you are putting the community first. It's sometimes why we see big video games companies struggle. They're marketing towards the shareholders more toward gamers. And I felt that was something that was a little bit struggling with with ISR at the time. So ultimately I made a decision where like I wanted to do my own thing. And also it was kind of out of fear in some ways, because I felt that I had no experience with the YouTube channel. I had one video on Inside Sim Racing, and I think it's one of the most disliked on the entire channel. So didn't really go well. And I wanted to learn at my own pace, because if I took over ISR in that way, I would have been tossed in the deep end, and I don't think I would have thrived as well as I did starting my own site and channel.
Yeah, and it's obviously worked out for you. You know, I enjoy your content a lot. I think you have one of the best channels in sim racing, and I really mean that.
Thank you.
And something I've noticed about you, Will, is you have legit fans. There's channels out there that, you know, have a lot of viewers and things like that, but people just go there and view and they leave. But you seem to have a following. Like, people actually, you know, enjoy your content and enjoy your personality, and I think that's huge. And so it's, like I said, it's obviously worked out for you. So how did you choose the name Sim Racing Paddock?
So there's this one guy behind the scenes that he sort of is my business mentor. And I think I've mentioned him a couple times. His name's Alan. And he's also relatively in the racing scene for my community, where his primary business is he designs apparel for race car teams. So largely, it's actually the crew shirts. So the shirts that the crew chief, the different garage crew wears. So he actually makes those. And then he also does screen printing, things like that. And he is like been a family friend for about 17 years. And he was one of the main factors. He was like, hey, Will, I think you could do a good job building your own channel. So him and I were brainstorming while helping him actually start this motorsport themed cafe as a side job. So basically, when I initially left ISR, it was to help him build this cafe. And then we were brainstorming ideas on how we could build our own channel. And it actually worked out really well. And then he actually helped come up with the name Sim Racing Paddock, where basically the paddock in the racing community is that area around the garage where all of the drivers congregate, they meet up, and they talk about their race. They talk about their strategies and things like that. Obviously not too much. They don't want to gain a competitive edge on someone, but they really, like, it's where they gather together, talk, and have a good time. So that was my vision for SRP from the beginning.
That's cool. That's very cool. And do you sort of have a long-term strategy for your channel? Like, again, you were involved with Inside Sim Racing, which is the go-to for many disciplines relating to racing and sim racing. And is there sort of, do you see Sim Racing Paddock as being perhaps the go-to for one specific thing, or do you want it to grow into this massive, sort of sim racing community, or what's your sort of bigger vision for Sim Racing Paddock? Or are you just sort of enjoying your time, enjoying interacting with your fans and things like that? What's sort of your vision there?
I definitely am wanting to see Sim Racing Paddock grow into one of the sources for the community. It's a tough thing because when I first started Sim Racing Paddock, I had the blog, I had the channel, and then I added in a forum, which isn't doing the best, but after a while, I felt like I was spreading myself too thin. I just felt like I was putting in all this effort, and at first I wasn't getting many returns from it. It took me a year and a half to gain my first 1,000 subscribers. And then since then, it's been a snowball effect. I've been pumping out more quality content, but it's also been at the expense of the blog and the website. And it's a tough thing because on the flip side of that, Virtual R is like, it used to be one of the main news sites, and now it's getting extremely sporadic updates. And then ISR, in the state that it's in, it's like basically honestly living on life support because of the blog and the forums. There isn't as much as there used to be in the way of sim racing news sites. So I think it is something I need to recapitalize on. It's something that I need to redevelop again and get that blog back up and running, because it's something where we need that news outlet again. We need that source for information, because the channel is great. The channel is great for personality, as you mentioned. It's good for entertainment value, but also in my mind, I have a passion for journalism, and that is something that needs to be explored as well, because there is the place for the entertainment. There is the place for the gamer muscles, the Jimmy Broadbents, the Billy Stranges, and everything. But also there needs to be a source of information as well. There needs to be a solid place for people to go to and get their information, and get their accurate information too, because it's one thing to jump around from place to place to place to place and gather the news, or even like back in the day, there was pretend race cars, the worst place possible for news. And like that is its own rabbit hole, and
most
like its own brand of radical right-wing propaganda news stuff. But bottom line, it comes down to, we need to be able to entertain, but also inform properly.
Yeah, exactly. And I think probably the go-to source for sim racing news for me right now is the Sim Pit, because Sean Cole, of course, every day at it's 9 a.m. Pacific. I don't know what time it is over there in Europe, but he does half an hour to an hour a day just on sim racing news. And yeah, I agree, Will. That's, one of the few sources we have for sim racing news. But unfortunately, because things happen in such rapid succession in the sim racing world, Sean only has maybe 2 to 5 minutes per sort of topic. And I think there is definitely a gap for that deep dive, that journalism, as you call it, for sim racing. So yeah, I'd love to see more of that in the future, definitely. And talking about the Sim Pit, I know I've seen you in the chat. I try and jump on when I can. I'm in the middle of a work day when it's on, but I do try and jump on and at least listen to it when I can. But you're there. Jimmy Broadbent sometimes jumps into the chat, and a few Darren Ganji, a few other people jump into the chat, and it's kind of like a place where the sim racing content creators can sort of have a common forum and go to sort of hang out. How important do you think it is that we, as content creators, come together as a community, as opposed to just sort of being disparate entities?
Well, the thing is that I subscribe to the thought that no man is an island, where community is a very, very important element of life. It's an important part of gaming, sim racing, whatever you want. You usually don't see someone going to the track on a race weekend and never interacting with someone else. And I think, honestly, that's also part of why iRacing is successful, where iRacing, it really promotes that community element. It has the built-in chat. It has the team functionality. It has the livery editor. So you interact with people to make liveries and things like that. And also the forums. The forums, a great place for community. So as humans, we are striving to have community. We are really wanting to have this companionship, this camaraderie. And that's no stranger for us as content creators. We want to keep in touch with people. We want to show the community, or we want to show people that we're still a community. Like, sure, we do have these pedestals that we like to sit on, but at the same time, we're still human. We still want interaction with people. We still want to show that we are still racers. We have our own channels and outlets and whatever, but we are still passionate about racing, and we're still passionate about community.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think I love doing these podcasts with, guests like you and Davy and Alex, because there is sort of a separation. Unfortunately, we don't have, well, I guess, like you mentioned, there's the iRacing chat and things like that, but a common forum for us to talk about what things we're working on and passions we share, mods we found, videos we found, things like that. So it is cool to have that for sure. And I think also another reason that sim racing channels should come together is if we can support each other and elevate the whole thing, we all benefit, right? Like I have a small fraction of the subscribers that, let's say, Jimmy Broadbent, Gamer Muscle, Will, yourself have. But if we can get everybody to go up, everybody wins. The guys on the bottom win, the guys on top win. Why not support each other? That's the way I look at it. Like, yeah. I enjoy the content other people put out, so I'm going to support it. I'm going to go there. I'm going to watch as much as I can. I'm going to click the like button, and I just wish everybody success. It just benefits the whole community. It really does.
Yeah, that actually reminded me of an element where when YouTube implemented their new monetization standards, which I understand why they did that. I do, but I wish they would have grandfathered some of the other channels in, where, for example, one of the standards for that monetization requirement was a minimum of 1,000 subscribers. Mm-hmm. And one of the personalities that's also a part of the Simpit, Mitchie Hoyer, he had about 750 subscribers. And he puts out great content, and I know it's not his primary source of income, but for him to lose that monetization, to lose that reward for his videos, that's a tough pill to swallow. So a few of us banded together and tried to pitch and get him up to that 1,000 subscriber mark before we had that issue. But I really do like that sense of camaraderie in the community. Another instance it reminds me of is the tech YouTubers. There's a lot of the tech YouTubers in the world, and there was this one instance where, if you ever heard of the channel Austin Evans,
yes,
he has a really good channel, but then there was that sort of tragedy where his home burned down.
I remember,
yeah, and like he had his home burned down, he lost the majority of his products. So I remember there was a lot of the tech crew, or the tech YouTubers, where there was Lewis from Unbox Therapy who played a huge role, and they helped him get a few new computers and get some more products to help him get back on his feet for the channel. So it's that sense of community that really, it humanizes us in a way that is great. And I'd imagine if there was ever tragedy in someone in the community, and especially someone in like the YouTube scene, that sometimes they have their livelihood, say like if Jimmy Broadbent had something and he lost his stuff, I would really hope that some of us would feel like we would want to band together and help out a fellow racer.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
somebody actually, Will, related to that, and I mentioned Total Biscuit in the introduction, and somebody created a GoFundMe page for Total Biscuit's family. So exactly that, something like what you talked about just happened. So
yeah, and it's tough hearing about the loss of someone in that community where like Total Biscuit was so influential for so many people, and
absolutely,
it's it's heartbreaking to hear about that. And like at least we as a community, like just lovers of games, lovers of like entertainment, are able to band together. And that's one of the great things about this day and age, where we are thousands of miles away, but
true.
We're still able to come together as fellow humans and support people.
Absolutely.
Well said.
So, Davy, I know you had some questions for Will as well.
I do. Will, you seem to cover quite a variety of sims. So do you have a favorite racing game or racing type?
So for my favorite sim racing title, I would have to say R-Factor 2. It's definitely raw, unpolished. I mean, it's getting better and better, but I feel like it does the best job of communicating what the car is doing. And also it punishes you for driving badly and rewards you for driving well. I've had races I've won in R-Factor 2 because I conserve my tires better than the next guy. And other sims, they are catching up to that level. For example, iRacing, I've had a few awesome oval races. I still think R-Factor 2 is king when it comes to that, but I like in terms of racing styles, my personal favorite actually has been open wheel lately. I've really been enjoying the open wheel racing and also some GT. But it's kind of funny, growing up, I was always passionate about the NASCAR disciplines. I was really into NASCAR growing up, partly because I grew up in Oklahoma in the South USA.
Yep. And
I grew up really enjoying NASCAR because that was what my dad enjoyed. And I grew up a Jeff Gordon fan, then jumped to Jimmy Johnson. Right now, it's kind of difficult to find a driver to support right now, but if I had to pick one, I'd pick Chase Elliott, because I was also a fan of Bill Elliott, but I really was into NASCAR. I was into those NASCAR games. Like, that's why I started my PC sim racing with NASCAR sim racing.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it really drew me into that. And then as I was shifting into other titles, I noticed that my taste in racing was changing. I was gravitating more towards IndyCar. I was gravitating more towards GT series. And it's funny because as my tastes were shifting, so did my sim racing tastes shift.
Yeah. Interesting. And you seem to be doing a lot of streaming as well nowadays. So how is that working out for you?
So streaming, it is great for bringing it. It's great for like the bringing in community. It's also great for giving them a home per se, like where, as mentioned earlier, there are some of the devoted fans that come into every stream and they really enjoy it. They really enjoy communicating and chatting with the community. And that's one of the great things where it allows for an unprecedented level of interaction. Because if you think about it, 15, 20 years ago, nobody had an internet connection that would have ever been strong enough for streaming.
That's true.
Just simply couldn't do that. And at that day and age, you relied on television or pre-aired events and things like that. So you never really got that sense of interaction. With the invention of YouTube and the invention of live streaming and Twitch, you really had a new level of interaction with content creators and community members.
Yeah.
And it's a blessing and a curse. You get the raw interaction, you get the raw emotion, and sometimes I feel I strive under that tingling feeling in the back of my head saying, this is live, this is live. You have to be careful with what you say and what you do. But also those mistakes, I'll use the same word I used earlier. It humanizes you. It really, with that margin of error, you'll notice that, for example, for me, I stammer, I stutter a bit, but that makes me human like everyone else.
Yeah. And is it Twitch or YouTube you've been focusing on, Will?
It's been YouTube mainly. I did use a utility called Restream, which allowed me to stream simultaneously to YouTube and Twitch.
Yeah.
But in the past month or so, I decided that I should just gravitate more towards YouTube.
Yeah.
Twitch, it's great for its own uses, but for myself, for my personal needs, I found myself benefiting more via YouTube.
Okay, and I noted that Jimmy Broadbent noted the same. He started out with Twitch, but seems to be focusing on streaming on YouTube primarily now. Now, for the rest of this year, 2018, and beyond in sim racing, is there anything particular that you're most excited about? Or as a general question, what are you most excited about?
I'm really excited about what I think is going to be ushering in the next generation for sim racing. So if you consider we have GTR3, we have Assetto Corsa Competizione. That word always trips me up.
Yeah, that's okay.
Competizione. But so we have these new titles coming. And I think that is going to usher in the next generation of sim racing, where if you consider with the early 2000s, we had F1 Challenge 9902, we had NASCAR Racing 2003, Richard Burns Rally. And then next generation, we had R Factor, we had GTR2, GT Legends, we had Netcar Pro.
Yeah.
And then in this most recent generation, which for all intents and purposes started around 2012, we had a R Factor 2, We had Assetto Corsa. We had the latest iteration of iRacing. We had Race Room Racing Experience. And all these titles, they're great, but they've been out for 5 to 6 years now. And it is logically time for that next generation to start. So we are seeing ACC and also GTR3. And I think that's going to really usher in this next generation of Sims. And what's interesting, though, is that we're seeing a shift to the Unreal Engine. And it's kind of funny because so many people are posting saying, Unreal Engine, that means it's going to be arcade. And it's like, Unreal Engine is for the visuals. It's not really too much for the underlying physics. The physics are determined by the person that is really developing the physics. Unreal Engine is just the back end. It only will output what you put into it. So I am fully confident we're going to see Sims that run well on Unreal Engine. And I'm excited to see that.
Okay. And isn't it so that GTR3, that's the one that's been worked on by Simbin in the UK, is it so?
Correct. And it's kind of funny, though, because so the Studio 397 and Simbin, they're run by two brothers. It's Chris Speed and Alan Speed. So I think it's going to be interesting because already with that announcement, they're saying that it's going to be sort of cohabitating with development. So GTR3, it's going to be arguably the more groundbreaking title. And then some of those updates are going to trickle down to Race Room.
Okay. Or have I made a mistake? Isn't it David Bell who's involved with GTR3, who's the brother of Ian Bell from Slightly Mad? Or am I mixing things up?
I don't believe so. I thought it was Alan Speed.
Alan Speed. Oh, so you're right. You're correct, Will. I beg your pardon. So you're right. Yes, that's true.
Yeah. Because I've talked with Chris Speed time to time on Facebook.
You're correct.
And yeah, he's said it's like him and Alan working together.
I'm mixing up the Bell brothers and the Speed brothers. Yes. I know what you mean. Anything else for this year and beyond you want to mention, Will?
There's a lot that I'm excited for. I mean, R Factor 2, they're gonna have the new Le Mans themed pack with the LMP2, LMP3 cars and GTE cars.
I'm really excited. I didn't hear about that. When's that coming?
I think it should be coming out in maybe like the next few months. I don't know for certain, but they keep on showing more and more previews, so I'm excited to see where it comes out.
Yeah.
And then also United Racing Design, they're coming out with more content for R Factor 2 soon, which is exciting. And then also it'll be interesting to see what happens with F1 2018, because F1 2018 is going to be coming out soon, and it'll be interesting to see how they get around that halo constraint, because I could just imagine there being huge backlash with people complaining, there's a big bar in the middle of my screen. And also, if for the F1 series, they implement VR support, because when you drive with a Halo car in VR, it is significantly less intrusive. But on a single monitor, it creates a huge problem.
Yeah. I noticed somebody looking at it, I think it was the Team VVV podcast, Alan Boyston's podcast, and they were talking about could they potentially make the Halo bar kind of transparent, but then they said, well, that would be technically against the rules, so because you have to simulate what the driver actually sees. So you're right, Well, that's a good point. Let's see how that goes down. So we're now into half an hour or so into the podcast, and we wanted to move on to some general topics if we could, as suggested by Mike. So Mike, what would you like to start on first? Would you like to start talking about mods?
So yeah, we can just jump into a general mod discussion. I'm curious to hear from you, Alex. I know one of your favorite mod packs of late has been the Need for Speed pack, and I know it got an update about a week ago. Just curious if you've had a chance to try that and what your feelings are, or if you've tried any other exciting mods.
Yeah, I really like the Need for Speed mod. One reason being that I generally prefer to drive road cars over race cars. So that is right up my alley, and I just love the older sports cars too for some reason. Maybe it's because what you grew up with kind of sticks with you and you want to drive that. But yeah, I really enjoyed the Need for Speed car pack. And I really enjoyed Need for Speed back in the day, the first one, which seems to be a century ago, kind of. But yeah, with mods, it's a bit of a funny story. I recently really enjoy driving unusual mods, and that goes both for cars and tracks. We recently did a Sunday race with an RV, which is a trackside object, but has been modded to work in Assetto Corsa with a huge engine. And it's just fun to throw it around, and it's fun to drive something different every once in a while, and especially something that you would never drive in real life, obviously, although that goes for most cars. But yeah, I have not tried the latest update for the Need for Speed mod, but I'm looking forward to trying it, and we might actually use that for next Sunday's race.
Okay. Sunday sub showdown.
Exactly.
And I was going to mention on the mod front as well, Will, you were talking about that upcoming pack for R Factor 2. What was the name of the pack?
It's not an actual mod. It's the first party one where it's the Le Mans pack or something like that for R Factor 2. And it's like the mix of the... I want to say it's the Lola LMP2, the Norma LMP3, and I think the only GTE car they confirmed so far is or is it the Chevy or something like that? But they have, I think it's 3 GTE cars, 1 LMP2, 1 LMP3. But also I was mentioning it's United Racing Design, where they were one of the first main payware teams for R Factor 2, and they have it was their knockoff EGT, which is the GTE. So they have that, which that was the mod I actually drove, and then they have the prototype mod, and then the DTM mod.
That's right.
That, like, I've always heard good things about the prototype and DTM. But yeah, I think, for example, the Virtual Endurance Championship, the VEC, they use the URD content for their endurance races.
They do.
So, or they use, I think, like modified versions of them, which were modified with permission from the mod team. And it's like you have to own the content to run in those races, but it's slightly modified for balance of power reasons. And they... like, it's good content. For example, they have unconventional stuff. They had that front wheel drive Nissan GTR LMP car.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what Jimmy Broadbent was driving in the WEC.
Yeah, and it was interesting because they were for this running next weekend, they were trying to get this team together of YouTubers. So they were trying to get me involved. They were trying to get Gamer Muscle. I asked Mike about it, and he said that just schedule couldn't work. But ultimately, we couldn't get a team together. But it sounds like maybe next year we might try to get a YouTuber car put together for the 24-hour.
Oh, really? And
that'd be amazing.
Version... Sorry, Mike. The version of Le Mans that's coming from... And I guess that's from Studio 397 in the Netherlands. Is it so?
There is a 2017 spec version of Le Mans, but it's a third-party mod, actually. So it's like a yeah, it's a third-party mod that was actually, it's a conversion from R Factor 1.
Yeah.
And it was the R Factor 1 version is the 2012 Le Mans configuration, but they converted to R Factor 2, update the assets, update the layout to match 2017, and it's a good layout.
Sorry, Will. Go ahead.
It's kind of good. Or go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, I saw you drive that actually. I saw when you were live streaming with the endurance pack for R Factor 2, and I think overall you enjoyed it, but there were some problems with the AI, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
There were some minor problems. So what happened somehow is that something in my R Factor 2 install got corrupted or something, and I was getting very, very weird frame rate issues. I was getting very weird issues, and I was getting very weird AI stuttering, almost like I was driving in a high ping server and it was just jumpy, laggy, whatever. So after that stream, I ended up having to uninstall R Factor 2. I reinstalled it. Thank goodness I have Gigabit now. But or else that would have taken me like 5 hours. But I ended up having that issue fixed by reinstalling the title, and that's a relief. And it was funny though, because with that issue, I was getting 40 frames per second in the front straight.
Yep.
And that's with a 1080 Ti on a single monitor. And then, or no, not 1080 Ti, standard 1080. So I had a 1080 graphics card, medium settings, and I was getting 40 frames per second. Yeah. When I reinstalled the game, I got 90 or 90 to 100. So it's like, okay, there was something wrong with the install, but at least that issue's resolved, and it actually worked well.
And have you been using the sorry, Will, have you been using the beta branch now, or are you back on the main branch of the title?
I'm back on the main branch of the title because it's the beta branch for R Factor 2 has been obsolete for about like 3 months now, I think.
Yeah, because the new UI elements were added to the main version, wasn't it? So
so the beta was mainly to test out the implementation for DirectX 11.
That's true.
So that was the main beta for it. And then a few months ago, I believe it was, they made it stable, and I decided, okay, we're just going to continue off from the DX11 and make that the main branch. Yeah. So sure, you can access the beta still, but for the latest content, you need the base content.
Yeah. You need to remove the beta branch and go with the main version. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay. I ran into that issue one time when I was streaming and racing with Gamer Muscle. He was still on the beta branch and I was on the regular, and it was creating that conflict because the beta was out of date.
Yep. So, Mike, you wanted to talk about Niki's win as part of the Blancpain GT.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily need to be a long topic for discussion, but just wanted to say congratulations to Niki team. Always great to see somebody from the sim racing world kind of, well, I guess he's originally from the racing world turned sim racing world, but always great to see him succeed. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's 2 wins in a row for Niki. So congratulations to him and the whole Aston Martin crew. They're out there crushing it. Great to see.
Beautiful car.
Yeah. And they seem to have...
yes, it is.
They seem to have a big drive now towards racing. And I actually thought he was driving for AMR, but then when he won last weekend, it was for this IRacing. I guess AMR is the branch of Aston Martin that's producing the racing cars, I suppose.
Yeah, Aston Martin Racing. He runs the 76. I can't tell you the names of his co-drivers, but I know he's running the 76 Aston Martin.
And he was driving today at Snetterton in the UK as part of the British GT Championship, and he won today again, did he?
Yeah. Okay. It's great. And, and just imagine in a few months when we have ACC, imagine how cool it's going to be to watch live Niki team streams when he's driving his own car.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Gonna be interesting though, because I think outside of, say, Project Cars 2, no other main sim racing title has the Aston Martin GT3.
No, it doesn't.
I think, yeah, iRacing has the Aston Martin GT1, which is like half a decade out of date, I think, or something like that. But ultimately, it's nice to see the Aston Martin GT3 actually coming to a mainstream sim outside of P-Cars 2.
And this year's version of the Vantage is the outgoing one, because next year there'll be a new one. Yep. And it should be included in Assetto Corsa Competizione, because it's officially part of the series. So, Mike, you wanted to talk about some recent exciting YouTube videos. And actually, as a compliment to Will, I watched your recent review of iRacing, and it was very good. It's one title that I didn't know. I know something about it, but I didn't have the overall picture. And I watched your video this morning, and it was really good.
Yeah, thank you. It's kind of interesting because throughout the years we have seen some older reviews on iRacing, but I don't think we ever really had one circa 2018 that tried to review the whole thing as a service, like as a full package. Because Inside Sim Racing, they did a few great videos talking about the dirt, but we don't really see anything about looking at it from the full picture. So with iRacing this August being a decade old, I thought, hey, it'd be fitting to do a review of it.
Yeah.
Retrospectively looking at where it came from, where it is now, where it's going.
Yeah, it was a great video.
And there's been some talk.
Go ahead,
Mike,
go ahead, Davey. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. No, we were talking about last week. We talked about Assetto Corsa Competizione, and will it be some stiff competition for iRacing? And indeed, Game of Muscle recently had a video. It was sort of clickbaity, but he said that, is this the end for iRacing or competition for iRacing? And it's a title I've been following for a while through ISR back in the day. And now, of course, your video will. And they've added the Rallycross, and they've added the dirt racing, which Billy Strange had assisted them in testing. So it seems to be growing all the time. And then they recently added the LMP1 cars, where the hybrid technology was really heavily implemented, and Empty Box had done some detailed videos on that. And then they're adding the Porsche, and then the Porsche 911 RSR is coming, and it's something that Jimmy Broadbent has been streaming a lot. And then, as you mentioned today, Will, in your video, there seems to be some AI technology coming. So it's an interesting title to watch, apart from the cost base and the subscription, that being another thing. But they have been busy adding different formats and different features. So it's definitely, earlier we were talking about, like, what are we excited about for the rest of this year, 2018, and iRacing seems to be a title to watch.
Yeah, and it's interesting because on that topic of will ACC overthrow iRacing, and the tough part with that is ACC is largely just going to tackle one discipline as far as we know. It's only going to tackle GT3 racing. And the thing that iRacing draws so many people in because is it's the all-in-one solution. It's that all-in-one element where you have NASCAR fans being appeased, you have road racing fans, you have Formula One fans enjoying it, you have classic racing fans somewhat enjoying it, like, even though the turnouts for those series tend to be rather limited. But you really have almost anything you could want, like, apart from maybe like rally. But with ACC, I can't see it overthrowing iRacing unless they diversify or allow modding. That's one of the things, because With ACC, you can't just thrive on one discipline. Sure, there are so many technological advancements. We're finally getting day to night transition. We're finally getting weather. We're finally getting those elements in a title with the Assetto Corsa branding.
Yeah.
But at the same time, what's the point if we're only going to be enjoying GT3 from it?
Yeah. Right. And we talked with Billy Strange last week about that exact topic, and we had sort of agreed that it would be amazing if they could implement possibly, you know, a GT4 series or start to get into the LMP series or things like that as DLC. And I think that's possibly a direction they could go. But I to some extent, I see what you're saying, Will. But at the same time, I like what they're doing with focusing in on one racing series and trying to make it perfect, because I think they have a good base. I think Assetto Corsa is a very good jumping off point for them. And you know, the physics are good, the sounds are good, the visuals are good, and you know, dial that in a bit, specify it to a specific racing discipline, and I think it could be really great. It goes sort of along the same lines as the F1 series by Codemasters. Like, there's no better F1 career, I don't think, in sim racing than F1 2017, and you know, F1 2018 kind of promises more of the same, but at the same time, not many people who really enjoy the physics and the force feedback of sim racing will say that F1 2017 is kind of on par with the R Factor 2s or the Automobilistas or anything like that. But if you had that level of, focus like the F1 series, but with great physics, like if you combine that with the Assetto Corsa physics, I think you would have something there. So I think that's probably what Kunos is going for with the ACC. So I'm definitely expecting big things, but I'm with you. I think they can't ride the GT3 train into the sunset. I think they need to, shortly after release, start thinking about future DLC packs.
And iRacing doesn't support mods, and as far as we know, this Assetto Corsa Competizione won't support mods, and obviously as part of the deal with SRO, it won't be allowed. So one would assume that as they go forward, if they do make it a platform for other series, it will only be from officially licensed content and not a series of mods to expand the title.
Yeah, I read somewhere, and I can't remember where I read this, but the developers behind Kunos, they haven't closed the door on modding. They haven't said it's going to be impossible. They're just not going out of their way to accommodate it. And as Billy Strange pointed to last week, that's probably a good thing, because if you have this whole platform based around GT3 physics, trying to, after the fact, add an F1 car to that would probably be a mess. Yeah. So, yeah, keep it official. Do it race room style. Keep everything official.
And will the additions of day and night transitions in iRacing, are they going to be using DirectX 11 or DirectX 12, or how are they going to engineer it?
I believe a couple of years ago they migrated to DirectX 11. I think it was like 3 years ago or so. So they already migrated to DirectX 11. It's more of a total back-end overhaul, I think, of the system, because if I remember correctly, iRacing, that for the longest time they were using static skyboxes, so you didn't see clouds move or anything. And I don't recall off the top of my head if they still move now, but from what I've been hearing, iRacing, they're adopting that mentality, like, we want to do it right. So I think they're wanting to simulate things like the volumetric clouds and how cloud cover can affect the track. So it's not just seeing the track get darker, it's also seeing the track get cooler as it goes into night. So with that, they are looking to really implement and simulate the day to night transition. So we'll see how that works, and I'm hoping for the best.
Yeah. So Mike and Alex, have you tried iRacing, or do you follow it? I mean, I kind of lurk in the background, so to speak. I keep up to date with what's happening, but have you guys tried it? Mike, you have, haven't you?
I have it. Yep. The problem is being a guy with a career, a wife, and a little one at home, my sim racing time is very, very limited. I generally race in 30 to 45-minute chunks, so I can't even commit to a rookie race. Like a rookie race typically will take about an hour. By the time you find a lobby, or sorry, find a race that's starting soon, you might have to wait 10 minutes in practice, then do your qualifying, then do your race. It chews up an hour pretty quickly, and that generally gets to the outside edges of what I allow myself for gaming. So I'm still stuck on rookie. I don't race that often. I enjoy the heck out of it when I do it, but I just don't get enough time to really develop my career, unfortunately. So that's kind of been my experience with iRacing. But again, I really love it. The VR is incredible. It really is. It's arguably the best VR experience you can have in sim racing, and the car physics are phenomenal. They really are. So I enjoy it. I just don't have the time. That's the long and short of it.
And how about you, Alex? Have you ever tried it?
Yes, I have tried it. I was driving it a lot when it first came out, the first year or two, I would say. Mostly because it was from the same developer who made Grand Prix Legends. And of course, that was kind of the holy grail of sim racing back in the day, in the late 90s, I would say. And so I was really very interested in it. And I kind of didn't stick with it. I'm not really sure why. At the time, I had the same time issue that when I wanted to just go for a quick race, that is something that's not really possible in iRacing, which is a good thing and a bad thing, meaning the races there are a little bit more serious. You have to, as Mike said, go to practice, go to qualifying. You have to take a little bit of time out of your day to really focus on that race. And that was not really possible back in the day. So I kind of moved over to Assetto Corsa when that came out, because I always loved Kuno's games, Netcar Pro and Netcar Nami before that. So yeah, I was thinking about installing it again and giving it another try, especially since I've never driven it in VR. Yeah, I might want to take another look at iRacing very soon, especially with the updates that Will mentioned coming up soon.
Yeah, and then back to Will. I noticed from your video as well, Will, that, and Mike has alluded to it, and also Alex, there's a big time commitment element with iRacing. So could it be so that they're trying to innovate, to add an AI element, so to allow people to perhaps drop in, drop out, and take a race now and then?
So AI is one of the things that we know almost the least about, because or basically, I think what they only confirmed in the forums, the only confirmation about it is that I don't think they are going to be using AI to bolster track our series participation. So, for example, in iRacing, you need to fulfill a certain participation quota in a race. So, for example, in rookie class races, you need to have a minimum of 6 participants for the race to be deemed official. And then for higher up series, you need a minimum of 8 drivers, or else the race becomes unofficial. So they're saying it's not going to be something where it's like, if there's 6 drivers, they're not going to add in 2 AI to make it official, which I think is a good thing, because you don't want a race where you're taken out by AI to affect your rating. So I'm going to assume that it's going to be to create a pickup and race like environment, which that's its own entire can of worms, because you have to actually configure an event and then build AI and put it in. But I think that it will be a good element, but I think the issue is it might come off a little gimmicky in some ways with the way iRacing's structure is, because iRacing, as I mentioned in my review, it thrives on a structured system. So I don't see it really being in a way where your AI races would affect your participation towards a license for motion. So I don't think it's going to be something where an AI race will help you jump up from, say, rookie to class D or higher up. I think iRacing's main business model, where only online races will allow you to get promoted, that I think is going to be something there. So it's going to be tricky though. And it's not going to be conventional AI, I don't think, because that conflicts with iRacing's business model.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how that turns out.
Yeah. And I guess...
Sorry, Will, what did you mean by conventional AI?
Or conventional AI as in like set up a standard race or something. And I don't mean conventional AI as in like the way they behave on track. I mean conventional AI implementation, such as like the set up a quick pick up and play event, because realistically with iRacing, it's going to be one of the most expensive options out there. It already is. But consider, for example, for the GT3 race, I think it'll be something where you're going to have to own all the content possibly. That's true. Yeah. So it's kind of weird though, because for iRacing, the way they structure it is if you own one car in the series, you can race in that series and it'll just download all the other cars in the background. You just can't drive it. I don't know if it's going to be that same way in AI events. I feel it should, but I don't know how it's going to work out. I'm not part of that studio. I don't have any insider knowledge about it, but ultimately it's like, I don't know how it's going to be, but I could see them saying like you have to own each car that you run in, but or not run in, but have in an AI race. But I'd be pleased if it's the other way. But yeah, it's going to be interesting because still, for example, if you want to race in the NASCAR series, you're going to have to buy the latest cup car. You're going to have to buy the track you want to run on. So it's going to be difficult, especially if you wanted to, say, simulate a virtual championship. And, for example, run the McLaren MP430. You're going to need to buy each track. You're going to have to buy Silverstone, which unfortunately is still the out-of-date version. You're going to have to buy... what other F1 tracks are there? You're going to have to buy Imola, or that's an older track as well. You're going to have to buy Monza. You're going to have to buy each track you want to run on. And AI promotes a very pick up and play style. But iRacing is sort of, in some ways, the anti pick up and play.
My assumption would be that invariably what they want to do is increase their player base, their user base, and perhaps the fact that GT3 is so popular, if Assetto Corsa Competizione is runs well, has day and night transitions and weather, and you can drive offline, and if the AI are competitive, then it would definitely be a competitor.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how it turns out.
Yeah.
Yes, it will.
Yeah. Now, so Mike had another topic he wanted to discuss, and this is quite interesting. VR versus single screen versus triple screens. So, Mike, would you like to lead with that, please?
Yeah, sure. And I'd be curious to get, as many takes as we want to get here. Whoever wants to weigh in can weigh in. Obviously, Alex, you're very passionate about your VR.
Yep.
Will, I can't recall. I think you usually, especially for the purposes of streaming, I think you like, running a conventional monitor. What are your feelings kind of on VR versus triples versus single screen? And like, perhaps maybe I can phrase this question best. What would you recommend for somebody new to sim racing, perhaps?
So VR definitely, I think, is one of the best ways to experience sim racing. It is the immersion factor. It throws you into the experience in a way you just simply can't get with monitors. it is definitely early tech. It is it's still something that needs to be refined, but it is something that is like once you really try it, it's something that it's a treat. And then yeah, for streaming and stuff, I really do prefer the convenience of a monitor. So generally when I'm doing a live stream, I have the game on the middle screen. I have my OBS broadcaster and chat on the right screen, and then I have my YouTube page on the left screen for managing the stream and stuff. So that, like, the convenience of monitors and the triple screen layout for streaming and also video editing and different production elements is really second to none. And that's something that until VR is more developed and is at a higher resolution, higher fidelity, I can't see VR for productivity reasons replacing monitors yet. But for racing and gaming, it is one of the best experiences you can get.
Alex, do you ever run single monitor anymore?
Barely. I can wholeheartedly agree with Will with everything he said. Actually, VR in its current state is still not quite there yet, and I am not even sure if the second gen VR headsets will be able to replace monitors as a whole. We will probably need a few more iterations after that, but the feeling of actually sitting in a life-sized cockpit cannot be beaten. There are drawbacks to the low resolution, but I think what we have right now is just barely good enough so you can use it online. You can see other cars in the distance. You can make out your braking points and all that kind of stuff. It could be better, but yeah, it's barely good enough, but not good enough for really wide adaptation of the gaming market. But yeah, when I do race in 2D mode, so to speak, just on a screen, it feels pretty weird. It's hard to describe. Now it actually feels like I'm driving a car that's on the screen, but I'm not sitting. I do not have the feeling that I'm driving, or that I'm sitting in. It's hard to describe. I have to adapt to it. That's basically what I wanted to say. I have to readapt to driving in 2D a little bit, kind of get my head in there. But yeah, I love VR. I've been a big fan of VR ever since the concept first came up back in the 90s even. But I will be the first to acknowledge that there still are downsides to the current gen headsets, and I am hoping, fingers crossed, that we will see a true second gen headset maybe next year sometime on the market. But yeah, we will see.
And for now, sorry, Alex, the Vive Pro is not it, or so I.
Yeah, I thought about getting the Vive Pro as an upgrade to the Rift, but I read a lot of user reviews first, and they were surprisingly mixed, actually, in terms of the noticeable increase in resolution in comparison to the standard Vive and especially to the Rift, which have the same resolution, but for some reason the optics in the Rift make the picture seem a little bit sharper. So the difference between the Vive Pro and the Rift is not big enough to warrant the investment, which is substantial. So I was quite kind of excited for a while there when the Vive Pro was announced. I was, yes, thank you, more resolution, we need that. But and on paper it seemed surprisingly good, actually, for kind of a 1.5 gen headset. But in terms of the increased resolution, I read something about 70% increase in resolution, or pixels per inch, I believe it was. But yeah, the reviews kind of turned me off, and then of course the price, I can't justify that, especially when
not right now.
Potentially the Rift 2 is just 12 months out, maybe maybe more, but yeah, no. Vive Pro, if I would have to get a completely new headset at this point in time, I probably still would go with the Rift because of the price difference. It's just very hard to justify $1,000 for that.
Yeah. So a question to all three of you, if I may, because I don't have a headset, and hence this is why I called the show Sim Racing Perspectives, because I wanted to get the view of from every angle. So I don't have VR, and the one thing I've noticed is that the benefit in VR is mainly for the person who's wearing the VR, and for the purpose of creating videos, I've noticed that if you don't have a really beefy computer, the replay that you see on the screen included in the video can be quite low res. So is there a trade-off? Because I noticed like some people starting with VR and then the footage will be very shaky, and it's improved over time, but I can take it or leave it, but invariably, and we've gone from 1080p now to 4K, so my assumption right now is based on the current technology that if you don't have a really beefy computer, there's no real point in making videos with VR, or am I wrong?
No, it definitely takes some pretty hardcore hardware to run it for sure. I saw somebody on Reddit yesterday had posted that they run a 970 and get 120 frames a second or something, and
really?
In Assetto Corsa, and that seemed way high. Like I run a 1080 and I don't get those numbers on high settings by any means. So I think their recommended minimum is a 970 video card, but I think for the most part people were running a 1060 or better,
or a 1070.
Yeah, I think, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's kind of the accepted minimum at this stage. And those are the prices are finally starting to fall down. I saw a 1080 Ti the other day advertised somewhere online for $550 US or something, which is incredible. Which is absolutely incredible, because 6 months ago that was almost twice that price.
And that was new, Mike.
I'm sorry?
That was a new unit, not used.
Yeah, no, that
really?
was a new 1080 Ti. I couldn't believe it. I suspect it's one of those deals that, you know, as soon as it's announced, either bots or some people that happen to be checking the website at that time scoop up the first 50 units, and then everybody else gets a out of stock notice. But it's just good to know that it's possible now, because like I say, 6 months ago it didn't look like it was going to get better for a very long time. And that is, you know, in addition to this $500 headset that you need for VR, you also need probably $500 plus in video hardware. So it really adds up.
And go ahead.
For me, when I first bought my Oculus Rift, I was running a GTX 970, and it worked okay for most situations, but ultimately I realized this ain't gonna cut it. So I ended up biting the bullet and bought a 1080, and it still can struggle at times under certain conditions. But yeah, it definitely is like a huge jump in that sort of quality. And as you were mentioning, there is the element where you like are calling it almost low res in some ways, and in reality it is when you're watching the video footage. Because, for example, if you think about it, the Oculus Rift and other VR headsets, they have two displays, one for each eye, which is able to simulate the full 3D effect. And I want to say the each display is like 960 by 1080. So it's literally half a display. So what happens is it's that half a display, and I think it's sort of upscaled to 1080 via the monitor, like via reprojection. So it has that, and so you're only like when you're watching the video, you're only seeing half of what's going on. You're usually just seeing the left eye. Which is why for VR videos you'll notice it's a little bit offset, and then you're saying sometimes it gets very shaky. One example that comes to mind is Jimmy Broadbent's videos, and Part of that is because he's talking while driving with a VR headset.
Mm.
When you talk while wearing the VR headset, your jaw muscles, your cheekbone and muscles, those are moving, and that's shaking the headset. So, for example, I do admittedly have some VR videos where I'm not talking in it. And when you see me not talking while doing VR, you'll notice the head movements are a lot smoother. You'll notice it's a lot less shaky. So it's interesting while being the presenter and with VR video, you have to find that balance. You have to find like that balance of what is engaging, what is fun versus what is watchable.
Yeah.
One thing that I would like to add about the shakiness of the video, because I had the exact same issue many times in the beginning, and one thing that I do now to cure that to a degree is I stabilize the image in the video editor afterwards, which works surprisingly well. Because as you said, when you're talking and driving at the same time, every tiny little head movement is transferred to the picture, and that can be very irritating to watch after a while. So I tried a lot of things, and the solution that I came up with was to just kind of fix that in post-processing, so to speak, and that kind of works pretty well.
Mm. And
interesting.
A question for all three of you, because you have a reasonable amount of subscribers to your channels. In terms of the content you're creating and the comments and feedback you're getting from your viewers, shall I say, do people want more VR? Do they complain of the quality? What's the feedback been?
I'll lead this one because I asked that exact question. I did a poll. I think it was in February. I did a sim racing poll, and every video I used to post in VR, I used to see comments, too shaky, you make me want to puke, blah, blah, blah. And so I was thinking, okay, people hate my VR videos. So I deliberately stuck that question into my poll, and I said, how do you feel about watching videos in VR? And it was overwhelmingly positive. People did actually enjoy watching videos in VR. It's just those who don't are a very vocal minority. So I was so glad I asked that question, because I was almost ready to give up on creating content in VR, but I think most people do enjoy it. And I think it probably relates somewhat to when you see old school, like let's say early 90s F1 videos. Maybe it's, Ayrton Senna ripping around Monaco or something, and they've got that helmet cam and it's super bouncy, and you can see him, turning towards the corner apexes and things like that. It is awesome. It is really, really awesome, because you feel like, you're from his perspective. You feel like you're right in that driver's perspective. And it doesn't translate as well, of course, to sim racing VR, not even close, actually. But I think it is that sort of immersion, taking our viewers into that, into the cockpit. So I think overall people do enjoy it, but those who don't like it really hate it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've had similar elements where, for example, I think especially at first when VR videos were first coming out, people weren't really used to it. So it's interesting because, it's adopting a new format. It's adopting a new style for these videos, and people weren't used to it. But then give it time, people get used to it and they get more comfortable with it. Somewhat accept that it's going to exist out there, and then they start to enjoy it. And it's funny because I had that situation at first as well, where with VR, they start saying like, hey, it's a little too shaky, it's making me uncomfortable, etc. And then a strange phenomenon started happening where when I was doing videos and stuff with a single monitor, when I was streaming with a single monitor, I keep on getting questions from people saying, did you stop doing VR? Why'd you stop doing VR? VR was fun. Why are you not doing it anymore? And I'm like, well, it's a lot more convenient with a single monitor. It's a lot easier to just stream with a single monitor. It's a lot less taxing on the system. I've tried maybe 3 streams with VR, and actually because I can't keep that stable 90 frames per second while streaming, I end up getting a little nauseous because of it. But that's just the way it really works. That's just the way that it ended up being. So for streaming, I'll stick with a single screen and maybe triple sometime. But for VR, I find it more enjoyable just driving and maybe recording the footage on top of that with shadow play or something.
And Will, you mentioned you have a three screen setup. You have OBS on the left, your gameplay in the center, and your YouTube stream on the right. So obviously you can't manage that if you have a headset on.
Exactly. And that's one of the tricky things, because the Oculus Rift is great. I think really also with the software implementation and the drivers, it works the best, because the HTC Vive, I've used a little bit of time on it, not in a sim racing application, but the HTC Vive, it runs on the OpenVR protocol, the Steam VR protocol, / OpenVR. And it works well, but at the same time, I don't think it's as good as native Rift support. And the blessing and the curse with the Rift software support is it's a closed ecosystem. So with that, you have no ability to do an overlay in VR. So there is an application in Steam called OVR Drop, and it allows you to basically like drop a window into the Rift or into the VR headset's display. So theoretically, you could have the chat window in a stream. That doesn't work with native VR support. It does work with OpenVR, and that ends up, but also the OpenVR protocol comes at the expense of cost. Or not cost, but system resources.
Now, as a final question to all three of you, we're running an hour and 20 minutes. What's the maximum you've been able to stay with a VR headset on before you, let's say, become too sweaty or nauseous? Or what's the maximum amount of time you've been under a VR headset and actually been comfortable? Or is
I
that a
don't
silly
think
question?
I've ever hit my limit time-wise. It's just that incredible immersion. So anytime I've done like a mini endurance race, an hour or 2 hours, I don't feel any nausea. Usually that's just if I'm if I spin or something like that, I'll get nauseous, but that's usually not too much of a factor. But it does definitely get hot. Like I notice if I do run an hour or two and take off the headset, like I'm sweating, and it's funny to get that experience from a video game. But the headset definitely does heat up after a while. But I don't think I've actually hit my upper limit on time.
But other than the fact that it gets hot, you can actually be under there, shall I say, for an hour or two. Is it so?
Yeah, I haven't had any adverse effects outside of that. Yeah.
How about you, Will?
I sort of agree. I don't think I've ever really hit my limit. I want to say the longest I might have ever really done was 2.5, 3 hours when I was simulating a GT3 race in R-Factor 2.
Yeah.
And that was a fun experience, but it definitely does get sweaty. I have a fan that I'll blow on my face to help try to cool off and not sweat as much. But it definitely gets sweaty, especially a couple of years ago. I tried the CXC Simulations Motion Pro rig.
Yep.
And I tried that with VR. And basically with the VR, like with the direct drive wheel, high-end pedals and motion, you get sweaty fast. For example, a lap and a half into the Nürburgring, I was already getting sweaty, and also it's fogging up my eyes. So that's one of the struggles too, where if it gets a little too humid, sweaty, you can actually fog up. And I got to a point where I wasn't really able to see well out of my left eye. And that's one reason why I do the fan. The fan really does help with that. but it's not perfect. But it's going to be interesting. I was approached by this company called VR Cover, and they sent me a couple replacement foam pieces for the Oculus Rift. So I'm going to test those out later on and replace those on my Rift and see if that might help a bit.
Yep. How about you, Alex?
Yeah, I think I had my limits somewhere around 2 hours or 2.5 hours as well. It does get pretty sweaty depending on what you do. I played a bit of the Star Trek, what was it called? Bridge Crew game, where you just sit on a terminal and you move your hands around. And I can do that for a long time. But when sim racing, especially with a direct drive wheel, after about half an hour or so, I start to get sweaty a little bit. And I do have some fans pointed at my face as well. But still, it is the headset itself, the front unit, the displays, I guess, get warm after a while, and you can really feel that on your face. So I'm hoping for that to improve with the new headsets that will eventually come out sometime. But I can do this comfortably even when racing for about an hour, and then I got to take a break at some point.
Yeah. And if you guys were working on a standard 2D screen, how long would you be able to go? Or is that a silly question?
Until concentration runs out,
until
which
you fall
can
asleep.
take,
So we'll go ahead.
Yeah. I think my record is about 12.5 hours.
Really?
Whoa.
That's long.
So, back before Project Cars 2 came out, I did a live stream where my challenge was to try driving every car and track car and track. So that is my record live stream, and I want to say that was like 11.5 hours. And then on top of that, and believe it or not, 11.5 hours, only 2 restroom breaks. And
really?
Wow.
I ended up also add in about a half hour bit to get everything set up. But yeah, that's, I'd say, my record.
Wow.
Unreal. That might be the record, actually.
Actually, Jimmy,
so too.
no, actually, Ian Plash, RAR Chevette, he did the 24 hours of Daytona single-handed.
Wow.
On his own.
What?
And then also, I think Gamer Muscle's done some 12+ hour streams.
Yeah. He does some very long streams, I noticed, like 5 or 6 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed like the other day, like he's doing that welcome insert country here stream, and I was like, whoa, like, are you kidding me? Like, I go to bed and then I wake up, he's still streaming.
He's still
I'm like,
going. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
He doesn't sleep. Yeah. I think he has problems actually sleeping. He's talked about it. Too much Twinings tea, I think. So we'll wrap up. Now we've gone an hour and a half, and Will, it's been really excellent.
Thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome. It's been really excellent hearing your ideas and clearly your passion for sim racing. And Mike, thank you so much for organising Will. Will, we'd like to have you back.
I definitely accept that.
Yeah, we want to talk about, there's a hardware topic we have booked, and we'd like to get you back. So, Will, I'll include links to your, anybody listening to this will know who you are, naturally, of course, but I'll include links to your channel and your social media below in the video description. Is there anything on your channel coming up that you'd like to talk about?
Anything coming up? I do, like, since we've been talking about the topic of VR, I'm working on a video where I want to talk about what sims provide the best virtual reality experience and what is like the most rewarding to drive in VR. So that should be an exciting video. Yeah.
That'll be quite a lot of time to make. How long did it take you to make the iRacing video? You spent a lot of time on that, I expect.
Building the iRacing review video, I want to say likely put about 9-10 hours into it. Yeah, because the original voiceover for that review is 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And then you have to go over that 40 minutes all over with a fine-tooth comb to like fine-tune everything, get the tone pacing right, crop out the bad stuff, and then it came down to about 23 minutes. And then you have to listen to the 23 minutes again, make sure you didn't make any mistakes. And then you have to build the review itself, which would be another couple hours. And then watch over that again and make sure there's no mistakes. And actually, after my first export, I noticed I made a mistake in my next rewatch. So I had to fix that, re-export. So yeah, I'd say about 10 to 12 hours of work in that video.
I made a joke with Billy Strange on Twitter that I noted how earlier I've been listening to podcasts for a long time, and sometimes you listen to a podcast and it's really good and you're interested in, you hope it won't end. And the previous episode, I listened to it about 10 times while editing it, and then via the RSS feed it got added to my phone, and I was listening to it and sitting there going, hoping it wouldn't end. which of course is completely ironic, but the thought crossed my mind. So Will, I'll include links to your channel and social media, of course, below in the description, and we would request anybody listening to add some comments or topic suggestions below in the comment section below the video. And also, if you like this content, you like the podcast and want to continue listening, please remember to like and subscribe, and also hit that bell icon, which seems to be an issue right now, because it seems that even if you hit the bell icon, you may not necessarily still get the episodes in your subscription feed. So what we've also made available is this podcast is also available on iTunes. And if you're listening on iTunes, we'd ask that you also add a rating and review. And one of the options, or one of the benefits actually of subscribing also on iTunes, is that if you miss the episode appearing through YouTube, you can always know that it'll be available through iTunes. We're also available on Google Play, which right now is regional limited, mostly available in the US. So we're available on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, and also we have an RSS feed if you would like to add the podcast manually to either a podcasting app on your computer or on your smartphone. So, any final points from you guys? Alex, Mike, anything you want to talk about coming up on your channel? And then we'll wrap up.
Nothing big. I will be building a flight rig for a change, which has nothing to do with sim racing per se, but that will be coming up this week, and I'm really looking forward to that one.
Yeah. And Mike?
Yeah. Just kind of business as usual. I was going to do some oval racing. We got the Indianapolis 500 race coming up in just a few hours in real life, and I was going to do it in Project Cars 2, but it looks like every channel that's ever existed has kind of done that better than I could, so I might skip that one. But yeah, I've got a few interesting videos in the can, so yeah, should be a week.
Okay. And Will, please go ahead.
Go ahead, Will.
I just wanted to thank you guys for having me again. And yeah, also one review that I definitely need to get back into doing is the GT Omega art cockpit. So that should be coming soon.
Okay.
Awesome.
And Will, thank you again for joining. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we'd like to have you back because there's more knowledge you have that we'd like to discuss more. So until next time, thank you and bye-bye.